TCG has overcome sports, and so we're
Wow.
getting more TCG cards than sports cards at PSA, which is kind of ironic when it's PSA stands for Professional Sports Authenticators, so not super accurate anymore.
All right, guys, we are back. Another episode of Cards and Content. A lot to talk about on today's show. We've got a little bit of a lengthier Stockwatch with our guy Gabe Card Stacks and a very fun, different interview than normal, going a little bit more into the TCG non-sport pop culture, segment of the market today with an interview with a special guest, Elizabeth Gruna, who's the GM of Pop Culture at PSA. So, very important position, doing some big things at one of the biggest brands in the entire industry. So we sat down with her, got to talk about what's going on in that world. We'll get to that in a second. So I'm not going to ramble a ton today. We'll start with really the what's on my mind. Really that one thing today. I talked about this in last week's episode. Again, I'd like to give some insight into kind of like what is going on into our world. I feel like we're building something really cool, something I am extremely proud to be building here with an amazing group of people. And yesterday, when we were recording this, yesterday was 7 years since I put in my 2 weeks, quit my job. I was a week away from getting married to my best friend. My wife, and sit here today. We talked about it. We'll talk about it a little bit on some upcoming interviews for this podcast. But I sit here seven years after that, and I can't help but reflect on like what this 7 years has been like. I think when I think of like what is on my mind right now, it is certainly the fact that like one, time has flown. Can imagine that this has been 7 years of kind of building this. I quit my job 7 years ago thinking one day I wanted to own a card store, and that was always my lifelong dream, but I really wanted to, just be able to put out some content. I thought it would be cool to kind of, live by the motto, like be who you needed when you were younger. Content wasn't a thing really. It was as I was growing up in cards, nobody like, there wasn't a lot of videos. A lot of it was like online breaks and like recaps, like breakers would do a break and then they post the recap video to YouTube. You'd have a couple people that would make content. So I remember some of the early breakers, like Firehand Sports Cards was a big one. Like I remember watching those videos, Cards Infinity Chris. Like I remember watching that, but thinking like I wanted to show people what I did. I wanted to show, what I bought, how I bought it, why I bought, what I collected, why I collected it. I wanted to show people just some of those things and hopefully inspire somebody else to be like, this could be something cool. Just to sit here 7 years later to talk on a podcast and, have built a 25-person company with some of the people I care most about. I posted a thing on Instagram just kind of reflecting on it, but, you know, it's been a lot of fun. So if you were listening to this, if you've made it, 10 minutes in and not already super bored, I just understand that, like, I appreciate it a ton that you would spend time out of your busy day to choose to listen to this. Obviously, hoping to provide a ton of immense value in this podcast with some cool interviews, some behind the scenes, some additional segments we're trying to grow, like trying to figure this out, right? This is a lot of our content for so long has been traveling the country, going to shows, buying, selling, and putting that content online. And this is something that is different to us, but, trying to get out of the comfort zone and trying to build something cool and different. So if you're listening, again, wasn't ever a part of the plan, but something we're enjoying trying to figure out as we go. So if you are tuning in, if you are listening, if you're providing feedback, if you're sharing clips, if whatever it may be, just know it means a lot to me. It means a lot to us, and it's been a very important piece in helping us build what we've been building for the last 7 years. So know that it means a lot. Moving on from that, Grove City Cardfest, a show in our backyard. was last weekend, was just a couple days ago on Sunday. Was, I talked about it before on last week's episode when I was like, I don't know how it's going to be. I've heard card shows were dying down. It's on a Sunday. Browns Bengals play on Sunday at 1, or play the Browns played. The Bengals played on Monday night and got smacked by the Broncos. But how would it be? Was not the top. We've run 3 now. Was not the number 1 attendance. Was actually number 2. So attendance wasn't necessarily up. It was still an amazing turnout. The gym was packed. We gave out 500 free pack tickets for the shop for that day. Just had an amazing crowd. It was cool to see some new faces. Definitely feel like I got to meet a lot of new people at this one. This is always one thing we look for, is are we able to attract new card collectors to the show? It's just important for us to really have a growing word of mouth. Like, building a card show is hard. So, for us, it's important to get the reach out there to as many collectors as possible. Some people that are getting into the space, some people that collect TCG, some people that are, 10 plus year hobby vets, but really trying to put something cool on in the Columbus, Ohio space. I don't think this will be our end-all be-all show. I've talked about that before, that the goal and the vision is to build something bigger and bigger. But Grove City Cardfest being at a local high school 5 minutes away from the shop, right in our backyard, has been a lot of fun to build. So we've got another one coming up here before too long. I can double check the date. I think it's November 9th. It's a Sunday. I'll triple check the date. I'm sure we'll have it on the graphic. I'm sure we'll post it on social. But one more in 2025. So excited to really get 4 of those under our belt and, see what the future of, that show looks like. I think card shows are a big part of the future, that in-person live transacting. Really, I think card shows, card shops are a strong entry point into the hobby for many. Obviously, online forums, discords, social, like, those are great places for the hobby now that really didn't exist a long time ago. But I still see shows and shops as really an entry point into the hobby. So excited to build that. But I told you guys I would recap that, last week, and wanted to, be honest about what that looked like this time. So hopefully November is, an amazing show and an amazing turnout before the, before the holiday season. The one last thing I wanted to talk about is when we did the latest launch, when we talked about some of the products releasing last week, I talked about it and what a cool opportunity it was to have Ohio State focused NIL. You got the UConn product from Panini earlier this year. Pages in that, some big names. And I thought, how cool would it be if Ohio State had its own product where, you had a bunch of Buckeyes and you could create an Ohio State focused product where it's only Ohio State. We bought a ton of it. Full disclosure, it's probably the second most we've bought of any product ever in the history of our company. And it was one of, if not the best release weekends for a product ever. We sold an insane amount of this product. I ripped some. We did some YouTube content around it. The product was amazing. It has been a humongous hit. And I think this is a good sign in a world where NIL is changing the college sports landscape, and you now have these card companies with the ability to make these exclusive products. I think it is a good sign for what's to come. I would sit here today and tell you, I would imagine with Panini losing the NBA and the NFL licensing, I think the first day they lose the NBA license is October 1st. I think it's today. I will triple check that, but I think it's today. But as that happens, I would sit here and say that I think this is going to be a part of Panini's plan forward. I think you'll see some of the other biggest schools. You think of some of the ones that they could do, and you think of, Texas, Michigan, Florida, Nebraska. You start going down the list of some of these, big multi-sport programs, and it just seems like this is going to be something Panini's going to be able to replicate and put out in other cities, and really focus on like those areas to grow. You've got companies like On It who do this now with brand or with school specific brands and school specific sets. So I would imagine this will be something Panini does in the future. So really cool, again, especially as an Ohio State fan, obviously, like to be able to pull Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, 2 of the best players in college football, 2 of my favorite Buckeyes, in a product while they are in school is a lot of fun. So I anticipate this being a part of Panini's future. hopefully we'll see another one of those products soon, see what that looks like. But again, I think this is a part of the space going forward. So with that being said, want to move on. We've got some longer segments today with a few special guests. Obviously, Gabe Cardstack and Stockwatch. If you guys have any feedback on that, would love some feedback on social. Let us know where we can add value to that. And then, as always, let us know where we can continue to add who you guys want to see on the podcast next. But let's kick it over to our interview with Elizabeth to find out what is going on in the world of pop culture at PSA. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We have a very special guest today, Elizabeth Gruna, GM at PSA for Pop Culture, is joining us on the podcast today. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on the pod, taking some time out of your very busy schedule to join us here. I'm excited for this conversation.
I'm so excited too. I've been following you for a long time, so I'm excited to be here and to talk about all things pop culture. It'll be fun.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. We actually got to chat for the first time at the National in Chicago recently, and our team reached out not too long ago, so excited to to be able to connect, talk about you and your journey to the top at PSA and what you're doing there, but also kind of what's coming next in the pop culture space. So really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I'm excited. I was happy I got to track you down at the National. I feel like you're such a celebrity. I was lucky to get time with you, and you were just as kind and generous and nice as you seem, from afar. So it was fun to talk with you, and I know we have kind of a shared interest in Disney and Disney collectibles, so it's fun to catch up on that. And then also the Ohio connection. I used to live in Columbus, and so love that you have your Ohio roots too. We both root for Ohio State football, so that was fun to chat with you about that too.
Well, this is going to be perfect. It sounds like we have plenty in common for this one today. But yeah, you mentioned the Ohio roots. Obviously, I got to learn a little bit about that in person at the National. But maybe for anybody listening that doesn't know, your story, I'm going to start right there with who you are and how we got right here.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Elizabeth Gruna. Again, you pronounced it correctly, which is rare. And like you said, I'm currently the general manager of pop culture at PSA. I've been at PSA for about 4 years now, and it's been such a blast. I love working here. It's so fun and a dream come true, honestly. But going back, I was born and raised actually in Seattle, so wearing my Mariners shirt today actually because the Mariners have been on fire lately, which has been awesome to see for a Mariners fan. It's rare for us over the years, but anyway, I grew up in Seattle, so I'm very passionate about Seattle and love all Seattle sports. Have had that kind of as my upbringing. Like I was going to Sonics games when I was a little kid and watching Gary Payton and going to Mariners games and watching Griffey. Like I just grew up in such an amazing time, I feel like, with Seattle sports. So that was kind of an early foundation with collecting and kind of that fandom and loving sports. But then I also grew up in the early 90s, and so that's where the Pokemon interest came from as well. So I definitely was one of those nerdy kids who was walking around with my Game Boy and a little satchel and playing Pokemon on my Game Boy. And I collected the cards. I was bringing them to school and trading with my friends, had my binder. Everything was perfectly organized. Unfortunately, I did grade some of my Pokemon cards from my childhood. They all graded horribly, like fives, but that's okay. It still is, fun to look back at those items I had as a kid. And so yeah, I kind of grew up with that too, for sure, in the Pokemon craze, which now we know is going insane. And so it's nice I have that foundation and that background and really grew up with the Pokemon, buzz and the excitement of going to Toys R Us and making my parents buy me packs and opening them and, trading with my friends and playing the games. It really is part of me and my childhood. And so now that I'm older and working in this space, which is still crazy to me, I really do kind of empathize with that experience because I grew up with it. And now I have my own kids too, who I'm getting to share that with, which is really fun. So yeah, that's a little bit about me in my early days. And then I eventually went to college on the East Coast and then ended up out of college going to Columbus, Ohio, and so that's where I started my career. Was working actually at Abercrombie and Fitch, which is totally a different business line, obviously, but
Yep.
my interest was always in kind of running a business and being a general business manager, and so that was a great opportunity where I got to run kind of a sector of the business and have my own business and get a lot of experience with finance and marketing and operations and with clothing it was like design and trends and all that, and I really enjoyed just that learning experience. And then from there I was able to take that and then get a job at Amazon, actually back home in Seattle. And so I was at Amazon for over 7 years, which was a great experience. Learned so much and started out on the business side there and then got more into the tech part of it and learned more like software development and product management and did a whole range of different things at Amazon. And then from Amazon, that's when I came to Collectors. So it was actually through some connections I had from the Seattle tech scene. So Ryan Hogue, who's the president of PSA, he was at Microsoft before. And then some of my other colleagues here at Collectors were also, at Amazon and in the Seattle kind of tech world. And so I heard about this opportunity at Collectors and what Nat was doing, with his new leadership, and there was just so much opportunity and it felt like a great kind of mix of doing something that I was really excited about in terms of, kind of getting back into collecting and actually getting to do that for my job, but then also utilizing this background I'd kind of formed with business and tech and getting to kind of bring that to Collectors and try to really add a lot of innovation and, kind of new concepts to the collecting world, which you can now see in practice with everything we've done with our vault. I was super involved with that and actually helping kind of build out the vault and the
Wow.
software that runs a lot of the inventory management there. I was involved with our grading system and a lot of just the modernization we've done from a technical standpoint as a company that's allowed us to innovate and build a lot of cool things in, our app and on our website and just the customer experience we're trying to build to make it a bit more modern and innovative. So that was a really cool experience. And then uh, a couple years ago, Brian Hogue and Nat kind of approached me about this opportunity to lead pop culture, which that role didn't exist before. There wasn't anyone who was really focusing so much on these things or thinking about the non-sports side, I suppose. Like Nat and Ryan love sports. That's their first passion, I would say, and Pokemon and some of these other categories were newer to them and maybe not as much of like a personal interest. And so that's why they, thought like, okay, this would be really important for someone to really focus on and, go all in on. And I had a personal interest, was passionate about these spaces too. So it was kind of this perfect fit where I got this amazing opportunity to lead the pop culture team, and it's been really fun. It's been a little crazy because I think in some ways we're kind of like a startup within the company with
Yeah.
some of our newer business lines, like our video game grading and Funko Pop grading, and then now comic and magazine grading, which is brand new. But then also even like the TCG non-sports card side, we didn't have a ton of expertise or the relationships or the events and all the different things that cater to that audience were pretty new for us and still kind of are. And so I'm really happy I've gotten to just focus on those areas and help us better kind of serve that population and that community because it is super, super important and is a huge, part of our customer base that we weren't, talking to super well or serving super well. So that's been really my focus over the last couple of years.
Man, what a really cool story. It was really cool to hear, where you've been. Obviously, shout out Columbus, Ohio. Love hearing that in the story. But spending so much time at Amazon is super cool. I don't know if I've ever met anybody that spent, you know, that kind of time at Amazon, such a massive company. But obviously, to come to PSA and to have the journey you've had there and the experiences you've had, I think this is going to be a really fun one here. Just because I think a lot of the questions we're going to get into, we're going to talk about some of your different experiences at PSA. But you mentioned in your intro, you talk about like Funkos and comics and grading, and while you're the general manager of pop culture, like what exactly qualifies or like falls under that umbrella at Collectors?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a very broad title, kind of purposely because it has grown over time. I think the biggest piece of the pie is TCG cards. So
Okay.
right now, Pokemon cards is a huge part of our card business in general, but
Yep.
I've really been leading the charge with TCG and getting smarter there and understanding the TCG space and helping us from a business standpoint just understand what's going on in this TCG market. So TCG is one part, but then also is kind of these non-card categories. So WADA is a big one, and so video game grading. They also do media grading, so we do like DVDs and CDs now as well. And then Funko Pop, that started a couple years ago. So we kind of have dabbled in the toy grading space with Funko Pops. And then comics and magazines, which again is the newest one. So those are kind of my business lines that I oversee.
Well, that is certainly a a broad umbrella there, like you mentioned. One point I caught in there is you mentioned the TCG cards, Pokemon being on fire. Would you say that's where the most momentum you are seeing right now in the pop culture space at collectors is with Pokemon cards, or would you say it's something different?
Yeah, I would say Pokemon is definitely having the most momentum right now. So even just looking last month, we received over 1 million TCG cards, and over 90% of those were Pokemon.
Oh my
So
gosh.
Pokemon is dominant for sure and continuing to grow exponentially. So right now, overall, when you just look like day over day, around 60% of our submissions at PSA are TCG. So that's crazy when
Wow.
you look back to even, a few years ago where TCG was maybe 15%, 20%, and then we were creeping up to around a 50-50 break between sports and TCG, and now TCG has overcome sports, and so we're
Wow.
getting more TCG cards than sports cards at PSA, which is kind of ironic when it's PSA stands for Professional Sports Authenticators, so not super accurate anymore when we're actually grading more TCG than sports. But yes, Pokemon is definitely leading the charge there. And we're seeing some other TCGs do well too, like Magic the Gathering has actually had a lot of momentum. We have Lorcana, which is a newer TCG that's actually a Disney TCG. We still see strength from One Piece, Yu-Gi-Oh! So those are all contributing, but Pokemon is by far the biggest one.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. You kind of touched it on a little bit there with Lorcana. Obviously, we shared a mutual interest in the Disney collectible space. Has there been some momentum in Disney cards being graded?
For sure. I think we always call them kind of non-sports cards, which I actually hate that term. I want to get rid of the word non-sports because it just assumes that sports is the default and these are like the non-sports cards when I'm like, no, these are legitimate. We should call them something else. Maybe it's pop culture cards. I'm not sure what the word is. We can workshop that, but yes, what we've traditionally called non-sports is definitely growing as well. I think Disney cards are huge with the release coming up, the Topps Chrome Disney this week. I don't know if you're going to be uh, getting into that. I'm really excited. I think that will help a ton. And then I think all the Topps Chrome Marvel cards, cards in general are super popular, and I think those are also growing. So yes, there's the actual TCGs where they're games that you can play, trading card games, but then the non-sports cards like a Marvel card or a Disney card,
Yep.
those two are growing a ton as well. And I think there's so much potential and upside there just to get the word even out more that those types of cards exist and they're collectible and a great, you know, investment as well.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. I know you mentioned earlier, having kids that, you can share that with. I know it's been really fun with me for collecting the Disney stuff to share with my wife and son. I've shared the story. Like my wife used to work at Disney, so I've really enjoyed like collecting those things with them, especially as my son, he's 2 now, so as he gets more into it, like, you know, he's come to the shop a couple times and like we have Spider-Man boxes and that's his like new favorite word now is like Spider-Man. So every time we see Spider-Man on a box, like we have to open those packs. Like, so I've enjoyed that, tenfold, like to be able to do that. But that's just me. I'm just one, small piece of the segment. Like, what would you say is driving that demand in the TCG non-sports, pop culture cards? What do you think is driving that demand? Are we talking like sports card crossovers? Are we talking kids and young adults? Are we talking nostalgia? Like what are we seeing that's driving that demand?
Yeah, I think there's a few different factors. I definitely think there is kind of a new customer base that's coming in, like you said, the younger generation. So we see a lot of like 8 to 10-year-olds, even younger in some cases, who when they are getting into collecting, they're more interested in Pikachu or in Disney cards or these, non-sports categories versus maybe sports,
Yep.
which is different. I think, a lot of these didn't even really exist back when the current collector base was, growing up. And so,
Yep.
but for people like in my generation, like I grew up with Pokemon cards and I naturally gravitated towards that. I love sports cards too, so I think I'm unique where I do a little bit of both. And I think there's a big population that does cross over. Like they love sports cards, but they also want to collect Pokemon cards. You even see, I feel like recently, especially, there's been so many posts on social media from famous athletes who are talking about their Pikachu cards or their Pokemon card that they love. Like they, even the athletes are getting into Pokemon and talking about Pokemon
Oh
or
yeah.
talking about Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever it is. And so I think that's been really interesting to observe of, you know, showing that collecting these, non-sports cards is actually really cool too and socially acceptable, not just for geeks. Like, and I think that the non-sports side has just a broader appeal, in my opinion. I think across genders, across age groups, across geographies. Like we see in our international businesses, actually, that TCG is pretty much the entire business. Sports isn't really a thing over there. So as collecting and as PSA and grading and all these things go more global, I think we lean even more towards the non-sports side as well. So I think there's a lot of different factors, but yes, definitely think it's young kids. I think too, we've seen just like with the Pocket app. So I don't know if you've ever used the Pokemon Pocket app, but that came out late 2024, and after it's pretty much like a new mobile app where you can trade and collect Pokemon cards on your phone. But a
Wow.
lot of people downloaded that app, and that introduced a lot of people to Pokemon. So
Hmm.
after that released, we saw our Pokemon submissions jumped by like 40%, pretty much right after that. So we can
Wow.
see too these cultural phenomenons can drive real changes in what we see, in the collecting space. So I think as Pokemon's done a great job, I think, of appealing to the next generation and to kids to
Hmm.
with their games, with the video games, with the app. And a lot of those people then cross over to the trading cards and collecting. So I think that was another interesting factor that was kind of unique to the last year. So yeah, we'll see. I think as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Disney, these huge IPs like continue to win over the hearts of young people and
Yep.
old people, any people, honestly, that
Yep.
it makes sense that people then want to collect those items too. So um, I think that maybe some sports people are getting into non-sports, but I think there's a lot of net new people is my guess.
Yeah, that's the non-sport thing's an interesting one. I actually had an athlete, uh, big time athlete. I would keep it confidential, but I had a big time athlete reach out to me the other day about some of my Disney stuff that I had collected.
Oh,
Just trying to,
really?
yeah, just trying to understand around that space. What they go for, or just where you find them. So I had a conversation with an athlete the other day about it. I obviously know like just through like cards and like in the space like Jacob Mizorowski for the Brewers is like super big into it. There's a lot of content out there about him ripping it. Joe Burrow posted on his story the other day his Charizard.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's been
I
really
saw
cool to
that.
to see that
Crazy.
from athletes, like just that kind of exposure in general. But while we are on the topic of like hot things and grading them in pop culture, like I gotta ask, Labubu? Are we going to see PSA grading Labubu soon? Like, I don't know a lot about it, but I know it's like we're talking about pop culture here. You're talking about a thing that's having a moment. Labubu, PSA grading. Like, am I going to have one of these on this desk? Are we going to replace this Pokemon box in the future with a graded Labubu, or is what's going on there?
That is a great question. And yes, Labubus are insane and definitely super popular. It's crazy too to see even at shows like the National or at Comic Cons, you see now all the dealers have Labubus too. So I feel like for some reason it's kind of crossed over to the collecting world, probably because they have that blind reveal and there's the chase element and it kind of falls into this similar mentality in the collector, mentality. But right now we're not grading Labubus. I think in general too, the appeal with Labubus is that people want to wear them like on their bags or show them off versus having them encapsulated
Yep.
feels like kind of counter to that product type. So I don't think we're going to be encapsulating Labubus anytime soon. Probably not grading them, but I think authenticating them could actually be interesting where we might play. And that's something I've been thinking about kind of higher level of how do we get into the toy market? Because we've seen even with Funko, it's kind of, a volatile market where a toy can really take off, has this huge moment, become super popular, and then at times it can kind of fall off a cliff and then it's on to the next toy. And
Yep.
I think um, we don't want to invest a ton of time and resources into creating a Labubu, for example, and building out that business. And
Yep.
then by the time we actually launch it, it's over and the craze is done. So I think maybe like the better long-term solution is we know how to authenticate them. We can tell if it's a real or a fake. So is there a way we could play in that space to help people have, more power in purchasing, a real item and making them feel confident that it's a legitimate item and providing some sort of like authentication service? I could see us doing that. Need to kind of build out that playbook, but maybe there'd be a day where we could help people with authenticating, but probably not actually going to get like a PSA 10 encapsulated Labubu. I would highly doubt that.
Well, it'll still be cool to see if, I think that's such a good point around like while it has the moment, the time it takes to kind of like build those processes out. Like you don't want to kind of miss that moment completely and have invested that time and energy and resources into doing that. But, while we're talking about new lines, like, new things. I think we're about 2 months, correct me if I'm wrong, I think about 2 months into comics and magazines. That launched right before the National, middle July. How's that been?
It's been going super well. It has really been such a fun project for me because I've been involved with that since kind of the ideation for
Okay.
a PSA to get into it. So a couple years ago, was building out the business plan, kind of scoping out the market. Is this something PSA should get into? It seemed kind of crazy, now that we can grade so many different product types that we weren't doing comics and magazines already. Like it was kind of crazy. Like, why aren't we in this space? It makes a ton of sense. And I think with pop culture and how important, for example, Marvel is, and that's obviously big in the comic space, and we weren't really playing there. I think it would be really beneficial for us to be that one-stop shop for a lot of people. If they have their comics, they have their cards, they have their, video games, all these different items. How can we serve the customer in all the different things they collect? It felt like very, very important for us to get into the comic and magazine space too. And it's an established market. It isn't going to go anywhere.
Yep.
It's going to stand the test of time, and the items are so valuable and special. And there's just a big market out there that we could go play in, and I think bring some new things to it too. It's not like we want to go in and just go dominate and take over
Yep.
comics and magazines or something like that. I think we want to bring in net new customers to the space. I think there's a lot of PSA customers who maybe have magazines or comics at home who are
Yep.
interested and maybe they've never graded before or they want to try it out. And I think we can help people kind of enter into the comic and grading space for the first time is the goal too, especially too with what we're doing internationally. I think there's a huge market out there that's pretty untapped, and yeah, I think a lot of room to grow for that business, which I'm excited about. So far, we've been doing really well. Like we have a big backlog growing already, which is great. It's a good problem to
Yep.
have. But I would say the demand and the interest has far exceeded what we were even expecting. So I'm really, really happy about that. But also we have our work cut out for us in terms of growing the team to meet that demand and making sure we, meet our turnaround times and get things out the door in time, but also obviously operate at the highest quality. And we have to be super careful because we're earning the trust of these customers. A lot of people have graded comics and magazines with other companies over the years, and so it's going to take a lot to earn their trust. Or if it's someone's first time, we want them to have a great experience with grading comics and magazines. So it's going great. Is a uh, short version of it, but it's been busy.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's a easy thing to do, especially when you're at the top, like, PSA is, where you have such brand recognition in the collectible space, and you just have such prestige around that name. And when you get into a
Hmm.
space like that where you want to grow and you want to, add that, like you said, there's so many PSA customers, I'm sure, that like have cards and want their other, collectible items graded. What is the what do you think is the biggest challenge with like ensuring the consistency and like earning that trust with folks that maybe know you for other grading pieces like cards and collectibles? Like, what do you think that biggest challenge is there for you?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you're right that it's really difficult to launch a brand new category when you have the PSA name already. Like there's some things that make it easier, I guess. We didn't have to go out and build awareness for what PSA is. Like
Yep.
people already know our brand, but it's a double-edged sword because people hold us to a very high standard. They expect, the best from PSA. They expect everything to be perfect and to have, a certain level of quality. And we want to uphold that, obviously. Like, I want to always make sure the PSA brand stands in great standing and people really respect PSA. And so I don't want to do anything that would ever take away from that. And so that's why we would be really careful with everything we did with the launch. Like, just even every step of the process, like having multiple checks, multiple verifiers, looking at every detail. The holder was something that we put a ton of effort into
Yep.
just because, we can't have anyone tampering with them, or we didn't want to have any sort of issues with counterfeiting or damages. We wanted to have the ultimate protection for your items because that's what we do on the card side. So we had to kind of translate that over. Same with our grading standards and the consistency and the quality, the training. Like on the card side, we have full grader universities and tons of training, and you're grading thousands of cards before you're even allowed to even like look at an actual customer order, and so I think we had to again bring that to the comic side too and have super super high standards for who are we hiring, what's our training process, how do you handle a comic with care. It's also very different than cards, and so it was a lot
Yep.
of new knowledge that we had to bring internal, and so it just took a while to kind of build up our skills and our confidence enough to where we're ready to be like, yes, we can go live and bring this to customers. We also did a soft launch, which I think helped a lot with just a really small group of kind of dealers and early partners who are willing to let us kind of handle their comics early and, test things out. And so before we even opened to the public, we had graded, thousands of comics. We'd practiced, we'd gone through the whole end-to-end process multiple times, pressure tested everything just because, again, if we went live and the website broke down or our holders had some huge defect or whatever it is, like we would
Yep.
have gotten slaughtered. And so we had to kind of be as close to perfect as possible just because, again, this was coming out from PSA and people expect PSA to be the best, and we wanted to uphold that as much as possible. So it was challenging for sure. It still is. I mean, we get all the comments on social media and DMs and questions about everything, which I love. Like it's so good to get that feedback, and I think that's too why while I was building that whole business, along the way, I had kind of this group of influential people and dealers and people who'd been in the comic space forever who I could really rely on and ask them like, hey, what do you think about this? Or, we're thinking of tweaking the label this way, or is this, piece important to the holder? Like, is the UV protection important or not? And they're like, yes, like that would be amazing. And so I think I had a lot of trusted people who could help me along the way too, so that it felt like this really was for collectors. It wasn't just me and my brain making up like, how can I make a comic grading business? Like it's
Yep.
meant to work backwards from what does the customer want, what's going to serve them, what's going to help the community, how can we differentiate, how can we bring really like the PSA way to this new space. And so that helped, I think, a lot too. And in my mind, I feel like the launch has been pretty smooth. Like, yes, there's always going to be things that don't go perfectly, but so far, knock on wood, it's been pretty good. And again, the numbers and the submissions kind of prove that. Like, I think people are really curious and want to try it out. And so I'm hopeful that once people get their books back and they see it and they feel our folder and see how premium it is and how great the customer service is and the end-to-end experience, I'm hoping they'll be like, oh, okay, this is awesome. Like I'm going to keep grading my comics and magazines with PSA. And yeah, but that takes time. You have to earn the trust for sure. So it's
Sure.
not going to happen overnight.
Sure. And you kind of mentioned the backlog a little bit in, there's a couple questions there. I think when you first announced this was around, correct me if I'm wrong, 20-day turnaround, or is that right? And are you still around that same turnaround time?
So we actually just increased our turnaround times this last week. So we wanted to be competitive with turnaround times at the start because
Yep.
why not? Like it's like we didn't have a huge backlog at that time. So it's
Yep.
like,
Sure.
hey, yes, like it can be quicker. So we should take advantage of that and give people really quick service as a way to try us out. But Then, yeah, now that we have this backlog and so much demand, and we've kind of had to, yeah, walk that back a little bit for the time being. But
Yep.
the good news is we have a good plan in place in terms of bringing on more people and um, training them and making sure they're obviously ready to go. But we are growing the team as quickly as we can
Yep.
without sacrificing quality.
Sure.
So that will help. So I think those turnaround times will get to go back down to 20 days, hopefully in the next couple months or so. The good news though is magazines, we originally had a 75-day turnaround time because we actually had some delays with our holders. And now the holders are here, so the magazine turnaround times now match comics. So that is a win. So magazine turnaround times actually decreased. Comic turnaround times increased very slightly, but they're still pretty competitive, I would say. So, yeah, this is what happens. It's very similar to what we're seeing on the card side. You know, we're having to increase turnaround times, increase prices because demand is just insane. And at a certain point, yeah, that's kind of how this
Yeah,
thing goes.
sure. Bound to happen. When you're the leader in the space for so many, grading and authentication services. But on that same topic, like this interview is going to come out a few days later, so it'll be a little delayed. But I would guess by the time this interview comes out, we'll be 10 days, 2 weeks into WADA becoming PSA. That's another real new thing for you guys. So, first couple days, first thoughts, like what do you expect out of that space, as we enter into Q4 and the rest of 25?
Yeah, I'm really excited that we've gotten to move WADA over to the PSA brand. That's something we've been high level working on also for a couple years and has always kind of been the plan. We feel like it just makes sense. The PSA brand is so strong. Not to say WADA isn't a great brand too, but I think it just doesn't have as big of recognition and as long as a history as PSA does. And there's a lot of benefits with kind of integrating into the PSA ecosystem down the line, whether that's with, the vaulting and our app and all these cool things that we're building as part of PSA. I would love for games and media to be part of that too eventually. So
Yep.
getting everything over to the PSA brand is kind of the first step in that direction. And I think too, there's a lot of people who want, their cards and their comics and their games, everything to match and have that same PSA red label.
Yep.
And so I think in general, it'll be interesting to see. I think there's some hardcore WADA fans who are sad, understandably, and they love the WADA brand and the WADA label, and they have all their collection of WADA. But I think there's also a lot of people who are really excited it's moving over to PSA and they love the PSA brand. So it's going to be an adjustment for sure. But in general, I think this will really grow the business. We've already seen a lot of growth with WADA over the last year. Like our business is up over 30%. Submissions are going really strong and kind of beating all of our forecasts. And I think we're making really good traction there. We had some really big sales actually recently too. I know during COVID there was a little bit of this inflation and kind of a bit of a bubble that was going on, and it's normalized,
Yep.
but now we're starting to see prices go up again. We're starting to see the market, is really healthy, I think, in the video game space. It was a 1986 NES Donkey Kong that sold for 370K last week on Golden. So that is
Huh.
the highest, sale for a video game we've seen this year. And it's, that's up from, I think, 72K was the latest record for that. So
Oh my gosh.
the market's going in the right direction. And
Yep.
again, that was like a grail. Like that's an amazing piece, but it's
Yep.
awesome to see that these higher value games are coming to, us for grading, and we're continuing to make a lot of progress with that business. So I do think moving over to the PSA brand will only help. I think again, similar to kind of what I was saying with comics and magazines, I think there's people who collect, items like cards with PSA already. Maybe this will get them to try grading a game for the first time and doing it with PSA. So that's coming soon. So more to come there. I'm excited though to see how it does.
Well, for just being in this, for you, just being in the, GM of pop culture at PSA's, title and position for just a little while. I think it's safe to say you have a lot of things going on, between the comics and the
Yeah.
magazines, the video games. I mean, you said earlier TCG submissions are 60% of, PSA's, submissions. I mean, you guys have so many things going on and so many things moving in the right direction. But as we sit here today, right, again, we're, like I mentioned earlier, we're almost to Q4. 2025 is wrapping up. As you look out into the future, the rest of this year and beyond, what is next for pop culture at PSA?
You're right. I mean, it's honestly kind of chaos right now with how much is going on between Pokemon and TCG going crazy, the water rebrand, like we were just talking about, comics and magazines are live. Like, just even those three things alone are a lot right now and a lot of momentum. I think we're just getting started with comics and magazines. So we recently announced that we have dual service coming for comics and magazines soon.
Wow.
So that's kind of our next big thing there, which will be really impactful for a comic and magazine space. There's tons of comics out there that are signed by the artists and the illustrators and the writers and the even the people in the movies. Like the autograph uh, space is really really important to comics, and so I'm excited that we can play in that now. And then same with magazines because we have a lot of Sports Illustrated collectors, and they have, for example, a cover with Michael Jordan and it's autographed by him. That's such a cool piece, and right now we wouldn't be able to accept that. So once we have dual going, we'll be able to get those autographed magazines in too. So that's something that we're actively working on. It's going to be launching very soon. So that will be a big thing to look forward to. And then, yes, the water rebrand, moving to PSA, that'll actually allow us to do more in the autograph space for games too. Like there's a lot of game creators, voice actors, different people in the game space as well that autograph. And so I think there's a lot of crossover and cool things we can do there too. And then TCG is going to keep going crazy, I think. My prediction is obviously I don't have the crystal ball
Yeah,
of,
sure.
what the future holds for the TCG market, but I don't think that it's going to take some huge plunge all of a sudden or crash. I think it's going to continue to grow. My overall sense is I think there's just a bigger market out there for TCG collectors versus sports collectors. That might be controversial to say, but I just think it's a bigger market, and I think we're still scratching the surface. And I think there's just more Pokemon fans and Pokemon collectors that exist in the world, and we still are kind of even introducing a lot of those people to what PSA is. Like especially when you look globally, like grading is not as common as it is here in the US, and so I think there's a lot of runway still for Pokemon and TCG more broadly and the non-sport side. I think like I was saying before, this Disney Topps Chrome release I think is going to be huge.
Yep.
And I think that's going to bring more of the Disney card collecting to the masses. I think Lorcana has done a good job, but it's, plateaued a little bit, I would say, versus I think with the power of Tops and just how beautiful their cards are and everything they're doing, I think them getting into the Disney space is just going to be insane. So I'm really, really excited about that release coming up. So yeah, I think we'll continue to have a lot of growth if I was guessing.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. I'm not really sure how how you manage it all. I mean, to launch that many, new segments at PSA, under pop culture in such a short period of time while moving so many things forward, in a time of just, pure chaos. So we've talked about it a few times on different episodes of the podcast, but I would tell you I see very similar trends now that I saw during COVID. Really,
Yeah.
really there's very specific segments of the market I feel like are just on fire right now. More I'm not as in the non-sport pop culture space as much for sure. I definitely lean more into sports, but I definitely get some like COVID type vibes from where the market is at, and to see so many things on fire, it's going to be a really interesting 2025 and beyond, here in the sports market, but it sounds like, there is at PSA as well, just with everything you guys have going on. And obviously I would love to, keep chatting with you forever and just keep learning more about this, but I want to end the podcast how I started it. And that is really around you and your story. Obviously super impressed with, where you are, what you're doing, and, the growth you are leading at PSA. Uh, but your journey into cards, into collectibles started so long ago. And I like to ask this question as I end really every podcast guest. That would be, like, if you were starting over today, what advice would you give yourself?
It's It's a good question. I think, I mean, with my Pokemon cards, it would definitely be I should have kept them in better condition. That's probably an obvious one and one that you hear a lot, but that was pretty devastating because I had some really cool base set and jungle cards, and but I was playing with them. So I guess maybe it's not really a regret because I did enjoy it, and you're a kid and you just want to have fun with your cards and play with them at the playground, but if I was thinking from a collector, investor mindset, I should have definitely been more careful, put those in card savers, you know, been more careful back then. But oh well, can't win them all. I think too, just everyone always says this, but I do think it's true. Is collecting what you love, and I think probably back in the day, even too when I just even started at PSA, I was kind of like falling into like, oh, I need to go, collect Shohei Ohtani cards because that's what everyone's collecting. Or I need to go collect this, or this is the hot athlete, or you're chasing over the big thing, and I think that's exhausting and isn't ultimately going to be as fulfilling. Versus, I've always been a Disney nerd, and I think maybe that was I thought not cool or would be embarrassing or not what the other guys. I mean, here at PSA, it's like mostly dudes who I'm working with every day, and they're
Yep.
not collecting Disney cards, and I think. I just need to stick with what I love. And even if that's not what everyone else is collecting, like there's value in that and you're going to find your people. And I think even people like you collecting Disney cards too and showcasing that is amazing. And I think that's when I started to really, really love it more was when I was just following the things I actually cared about. And so I think that was why too with Lorcana, for example, when that came out a couple years ago, I was so genuinely excited because I love Disney and I love TCGs. I wanted to actually play the game, so I was going to my local game store and actually playing and learning how to play alongside everyone else and playing competitively and building my deck, but then also collecting, and grading my enchanted cards I got. And I feel like that was when I really, really reconnected with my love for, cards was when it was something I actually cared about and I loved versus just trying to chase the shiny thing. And
Yeah.
I feel like there aren't that many hardcore Lorcana collectors here, but I'm glad to do it. And I really just love it. I recently got some cool promo cards actually at Disneyland, like these ones.
I think I saw
They are
this.
doing yeah, they're like doing
Yeah.
activations in the parks now, which is
That's
amazing.
crazy.
And I know, and I feel like not that many people even know about it, but you can get free packs at Disneyland. You can get these promo cards and go through this really cool customer experience. And so, I just love collecting the stuff I love, even though if it's weird and different and not the cool stuff. I think that's my biggest advice.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. I think being true to who you are, like the collecting what you love thing, is something I post in a lot of my content. I've collected F1, Disney, Be Friends, literally a little bit of everything, and all for different reasons. But I think in the end, if you collect what you love, like you'll never be disappointed, right? It's you can get lost in kind of lost in the sauce around collecting the who's who and the what's hot now, and I think collecting what you love at the end of the day is ultimately the best recipe for success in the market. It's just if you enjoy it, that's I think at the end of the day we're all collectors. So I think that's amazing advice. So um,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's been cool. I think Disney in general too, like I think is very high potential. And I think you're on it as well, but there's so many Disney collectibles and it feels like a very untapped market and something that there's a lot of room for us to grow. Like I was going to show too, I have
oh, that's cool.
like been collecting these Mickey Mouse magazines. So this was a first solo cover from Donald Duck, which I love. And I saw this just at, a random show and it was just on a display and I had to pick it up. But now I'm collecting those. And then I have like sealed boxes of like the first chapter of
Oh yeah.
Lorcana. I just am trying to collect all these Disney things that I love. And I think, yeah, that'll stand the test of time.
Yep, aligned. Well, I didn't know about the magazine, so that's something I get to check out now. So appreciate you sending that over. So I'll definitely have to check those out now. But seriously, thank you again for taking the time and for coming on the podcast. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
All right, what's going on, guys? We are back. We've got some more Stockwatch. Week number 2 here on the pod. we've got the one, the only Gabe Card Stacks to help us, fill us in on a wild college football weekend and ultimately see whose stock is up and see whose stock is down. So, Gabe, welcome back. Shout out to you for, sending me some updates on who's on your list. I'm gonna pick apart this list here in a second. But how was the weekend of watching college football and watching the craziness that unfolded?
Yeah, it was a great weekend. A lot of good games, a lot of high-end games, very satisfying. A lot of overtime games just in general across the map. So I was very pleased and ready to break it down.
Yeah, you said some overtime games. We're gonna get into one in particular, maybe a double overtime game. I'm excited to talk about that. But a lot of upsets this weekend, so I think this is going to be a fun stock watch. 3, 4, and 5 all lose. I think Florida State was 8 when they got what could quite possibly be the single greatest storming the field I've ever seen in the end zone. Those clips on Twitter. I think Squirrel White was in the corner when they stormed the field. Absolutely iconic storming of the field. But quick takeaways from this weekend before we really dive into stock up.
Coming back off of this weekend, I think that there's more clarity, I think, in college football, despite the upsets. And I think with that, though, there's also just going to be a lot more pandemonium. But I think coming to the college football playoff race and such, I think there's going to be like so many 9-3 teams,
Yep.
10-2 teams that there's going to be 20 teams that could make a case, I think, at the end of the day for those final, or I guess for the 12 spots. And you've got 5, 6, 7 teams looking at this number 12 and 11 spot in the playoffs. So I'm excited as each week continues to see who is the real deal and who kind of comes out on top.
Yeah, that's we were talking a little bit here Saturday. I was watching some of the games with my buddies, and I feel like this is just going to be a wide open year. Obviously, I'm super biased, so I'm curious of your opinion. But I feel like the top is pretty clear right now. I feel like Ohio State's the best team in the country. Feel pretty open about that. The defense is incredible. Caleb Downs is the best, in my opinion, the best defender in the country. I know some will argue that, especially with how Ruben Bain has looked this year. Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, Arvell Reese. I'm going to go on record right now and tell you Arvell Reese is going to be the second coming of Micah Parsons. Arvell Reese is an animal. If you don't know who that is, you will by the end of the year. He is incredible. Watch some tape on Arvell Reese. He's a ginormous linebacker that plays for Ohio State. They use him in spy on Damon Williams this weekend. I believe, Gabe, correct me if I'm wrong, Washington, number 1 scoring offense in the country entering last week?
Yeah, if not the number one, it's like a point difference between like them, USC, and all those other schools. 0
touchdowns for any of the... I don't think they scored a single touchdown. Was it 24-6? I don't think they scored a single touchdown. No. Took the Buckeyes a little bit to kind of get that offense moving. 22 straight road wins. Beat Texas at home. I just feel really good about where the Buckeyes are headed right now. Julian Sand is beyond accurate. That dude has some touch on the ball. Bo Jackson looks really good. Donaldson runs incredibly hard. Have a great tight end pairing in Kazmarek and Claire. Jeremiah Smith, I would imagine right now, if the Heisman started today, would be 1A, 1B in the Heisman race. It feels really good right now. Then you've got Oregon with a big win. We'll get into that. And then it's going to get into, again, I think Miami is a really, really good team. What will Texas be? Georgia lost at Alabama. Florida State loses. Clemson can't win a game. You look at some of these teams that were preseason favorites. LSU loses to Ole Miss. Just a lot of, I think that's, your point is incredibly true here, is I think there's going to be a lot of teams with losses. So this is going to be fun to kind of track some of these quote unquote stock prices here with up and down on some of these guys' cards, because I don't envision there being many teams going undefeated. So how will losses affect some of these guys? I would imagine we'll see some guys on here that are going to be up 1 week and down 1 week. So I'm intrigued to watch that, but I feel like it was a really good weekend for college football. And Yeah, just a lot of teams losing early. So I think your point is very fair that we're going to see some 3-loss teams in the playoff this year.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see just those teams that lose and then how their prices work out. Just because when a team does lose, you do see some of these guys drop in price, and it's just kind of like the undefeated shine certainly starts to fade away. So with those multiple loss teams and still in the hunt, I'm hopeful that that keeps more teams in the competitive market and it keeps them afloat. So we'll be monitoring that all season.
Yep, aligned. All right, let's just get right into it. After the mayhem from this weekend, 4 top 10 teams losing, who is on the stock up list for this week?
All right, so I had a couple and I had to narrow it down. I feel good about this trio though. We'll start with Diego Pavia, actually, Vanderbilt quarterback, one of my favorite player in college football.
Wow.
I get it. It was only yes. I just like the Baker Mayfield, the Johnny Manziel type. I like that, the confidence. He went on podcast saying they're going to win the national championship. He's the best quarterback. He lays his body out on the line, and you live and die by it. If he gets hurt, you left it all on the line. It is what it is. But I just love him. He's just a menace. And they played Utah State, but he had 6 touchdowns this week, and they're 5-0 now on the season. And Vegas had them at 4.5 wins to start the year.
Wow.
So they have it's just always been, is Vanderbilt for real? Like they've beat a couple of good teams last year, but now I think they're trending in the right direction. They're not a great team like talent wise, but they're playing together like fast, physical, tough. I love just how they play. And then Utah State. Honestly, okay, Utah State, they're going to be a 6-win team that gets into a bowl game, and that's a brutal bowl matchup if you're like NC State. They're going to be a tough team. They're a fun team. Bryson Barnes is a good quarterback, and they've put up 35 points on Vandy and 22 points on Texas A&M. Those are the only 2 losses. They put up more points than Auburn did at Texas A&M this weekend. Anyways, wow. Diego Pavia, he's been going off. He's one of the poster boys for Bowman University this year and the new set that'll be dropping. So I'm a big fan of Pavia. I hope his prices go up just because he's a fun player to watch. They got a big one that we'll talk about with Bama, and I hope that they can pull it off again this week. So that's number 1. Number 2, Jeremiah Love. We're back on track with Notre Dame here. And week 1 is also crazy because there were also so many games. I think if you line Alabama and Florida State up again, I think that's a vastly different result. Baylor, Auburn, line those 2 up again. It's just week 1 is just so difficult to evaluate and prepare and do all that. Jeremiah Love, even dating back to last year, was he hurt? He's only getting 4 carries in the national championship game. Didn't get many carries versus Miami. Now it looks like he's back. He's had 8 touchdowns, I think, in the last 2 weeks. Shadarian Price is their backup, and he's scoring just as much. C.J. Carr looks great. So Jeremiah Love, I think, is back on the running back 1 track that he was kind of all offseason. I went very hard on Jeremiah Love autos this offseason. Yeah. I feel like I looked at Ashton Genty prices at 120, and he was by far RB1. Of course, a historic season, but I just felt like Notre Dame, with him being potential RB1 for 2026, his auto was $30 or $40. So I just felt like if you're buying Genty at 120, I like the room there. I think they're up to $80-ish there on the base autos. So Jeremiah Love back, Notre Dame clicking. I like that. Last one, the biggest game of the week, Dante Moore, and he did it. He beat Penn State. It was a massive game in overtime. And what's crazy is, Ryan, Friday, Saturday, I was getting offers all morning, all night on Dante Moore before the game.
Yep.
And I was like, what is going on?
Yep.
I tweeted about it, and someone was like, oh, McShay was just on, I think, Bill Simmons' podcast, and he said he's quarterback 1 in the draft. He's the best quarterback in the draft, and it makes sense, I guess, seeing that quick spike. And then his prices started to take off again after the game. So now I think the front runner for the Heisman, Oregon in the driver's seat until they match up against Ohio State at some point, and they look like they are the truth. So big win for Dante Moore and the Ducks, and excited to see what they do.
I love this list. I was eager to talk about this because I didn't know who you were going to choose for the list, but this is a great list. I love the comparisons to Manziel and Mayfield with Pavia. dude just seems like a guy you want on your team, leading your your guys to battle. He's a lot of fun to watch. Game day this weekend, Bama, Vandy. Crazy to think that we sit here in 2025 and Vandy is a part of game day. Like Alabama Vandy's the game day matchup of the week. That's it's kind of crazy. I mean, especially when you look back at the season. You look at the start of the season and you see Texas and Florida playing this weekend, and you're like, that seems like a lock for game day. You're like, you know what? Didn't work out that way. Vandy and Alabama is this week's game day. So crazy to see. It's going to be a good game. Like, I watched some of the Georgia Bama game periodically. Obviously, I was more invested in the Penn State Oregon game. But I watched a little bit of that. Ty Simpson looked good. So excited to see how that game unfolds this weekend. So I love Pavia. The other piece you mentioned of that is Bowman Chrome. Like, he doesn't have a lot of stuff right now. So there are a couple options to get his cards, but this is not a guy like a Cade Klubnik or Nussmeier, Arch Manning, where, the options to get their cards are a little bit more plentiful. So a little bit less supply on him. Then Jeremiah Love. Picked up a Bowman Chrome PSA 10 base auto this weekend. I think those do somewhere around the $180 to $200 mark these days. He is the best running back in the country. I will fight for that. I think he's, like you said, he's going to be running back one in the class. He's the real deal. He's really, really good. I was very high on Jeremiah Love. I think before the season when you and I spoke, he's the real deal. Notre Dame stuff sells incredibly well to begin with. He's the real deal. Obviously not the start of the season, Notre Dame's looking for, losing too early. But he's good. They're going to play in a lot of TV games. He's going to get a lot of screen time. He's the real deal. I'm very optimistic about Jeremiah Love's future. And then Dante Moore. Watched 95% of the Penn State game. He's good. He is really good. We had talked about this, you and I don't know if this was either content we recorded or some of our weekly phone calls, but we had talked during last season when Oregon was in some of those press conferences. I think it was for the Rose Bowl when Ohio State smacked Oregon in the Rose Bowl. There was a lot of people talking about Dante Moore. They're like, this kid's the real deal. This kid's smooth. And I started picking up some stuff. I'm like, if the whole team is talking about Dante Moore when Dylan Gabriel's leading them to a Rose Bowl, I don't think they had lost it at that point. They'd beat Penn State in the Big Ten title. They'd beat Ohio State. They're the number one team in the country. And they're like, hey, this Dante Moore kid is good. So I was like, okay, let me get some Dante Moore stuff. He was at UCLA. We had talked about him before. His stuff, we've got Card Ladder up. Brian, do me a favor. Search highest sold. So it's not up there yet. I believe I'll have to double check, but I believe we have officially crossed by a landslide the most expensive Dante Moore sale ever this weekend. Sold on our eBay page. We had the National Super Auto. I was buying his stuff at the National. Picked up the Super Auto. It sold this weekend. I still could be waiting on payment. We'll see. It shows up on eBay sold listings. So I'll have to triple check. I'm 99% positive it has been paid for. But like you, we were getting offers the morning of the game. We had a bunch of people reach out about the Super Auto in his Oregon uniform, his first Super Auto in an Oregon uniform. We have a couple of Sapphire Autos and some other bigger stuff in his college uniform, in his, UCLA uniform. But his stuff has been trending up. And then to go on the big stage and to beat Penn State in Happy Valley, in the whiteout, on the road. Man, what a game, what a win. And like you said, I think it's very fair. The Heisman voting was happening right now. He's probably 1A right now for the Heisman Trophy. This kind of buzz early. Oregon is clearly a really good team. Going to be a lot of buzz. I think you're going to really... I don't think this will be the first... I don't think this will be the only time we see Dante Moore on Stockwatch the rest of the year. I would expect you'll see him return, especially if he's in Bowman Chrome U. I can't imagine if he's in Bowman Chrome U here in a few weeks, whenever that comes out, that there's not a lot more Dante Moore talk as the season progresses.
Yeah, for sure. And the nice thing about him being in the newest set, even though it's not a first, the Oregon collectors are going to go so crazy for that that's got some insane value. And people, again, kind of like your Will Howard situation last year, like not only does he go to a huge fan base with Ohio State,
Yep.
but then just remembering him as an Ohio State Buckeye with a national championship, like that would help the market tremendously with a non-first auto. So
Yep.
yeah, Dante Moore, man, he's the truth. I didn't believe in him. I didn't like him at UCLA. It was a bad team, but I didn't like him. And then I also didn't like personally going to Oregon to just sit. I applaud him for being patient and like, hey, I'm gonna go learn the system, go learn behind Dylan, trusting the staff not to out recruit him in that process. Because for a moment, Quinn Ewers was like, oh, is he gonna hit the portal? There's a Big Ten team that's paying up. So I was like, is he gonna go? Then he was in a battle with Austin Novostad, their backup quarterback, and I was like, But all that chatter in January was real, where it was like, yo, he's the truth. Like, just watch, he's gonna be there, and he's doing it. So,
Yep.
hats off to Dante Moore.
All right, before we get into some of the recaps from this past weekend and we talk a little bit more about these games, give me the other side of this list. Give me the stock down for this week.
Okay, first one, Jackson Arnold.
Mm.
I have never been a Jackson Arnold guy. When he came out in 2023, I was like, this guy's the most overhyped, priced, over. Just I was over. I didn't like it. Didn't like it.
Real quick,
benched.
just random
Yeah.
thought on that topic, because I think we might actually agree on this. Is it fair to say Jackson Arnold? I would love to really think about this. Is Jackson Arnold the most overpriced person on day one of Bowman Chrome release ever? Like,
Ooh.
overpriced versus overhyped. Like, somebody
Yeah,
that came out of the
yeah.
gate, you're like, this makes no sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair because, again, as much as I don't like Nico, like they were in the playoff conversation, like they were 11-0 or 11-1 at that point when the product released. So,
Yep.
like they were going in the playoff conversation, but Jackson Arnold never played a snap. And I was like, all right, is he the guy after Dylan Gabriel and, all of that. So, yeah, just he was up there with Shadur, and I never understood why. Plays against Arizona, of all teams, actually. I think he had like 4 turnovers, so that was great. And then transfers to Auburn, and I was still out. And then they bring in the number 4 portal class in the country. They have all these weapons for him. They retool the offensive line. Defense looks good. And I'm like, all right, fine. A week before the season, 2 weeks, I'm like, fine, just in case, I'm going to buy some Auburn. I'm going to buy this Kool-Aid. And they beat Baylor, which, again, if you line those two teams up, like, I think Baylor would love to have that back. And Auburn's like, man, we got to get back to that spot. So they lose to Texas A&M, 10 points. I get it. A&M's a tough defense, but just Jackson Arnold just trending down. I don't even know if, like, I don't know. Do you hit the portal? Like, I think you should go to West Virginia or something and just try to get out of another fresh start for this kid, drop down a level. But
Yikes.
Jackson Arnold, I'm just like, man, I'm over it. I'm over this saga. And his Bowman first autos hit like $20 at one point this offseason. And that's when I was like, fine, I'll go back in. And now I don't know if there's like another price point that would be like, all right, unless he goes to like a West Virginia or like a Tulane or something in the portal and gets another fresh start. I'm kind of out on
His stuff's
Jackson Arnold.
definitely down. A Fuchsia Auto SGC 10 to 150 from 24 did $15. You have a PSA 10 Kahuna Auto did $60. A Bowman's Best Relic Jersey Auto did $14.50. These are all according to Card Ladder. You got a couple outlier sales, like a Big Kahuna Auto from last year did 55 raw. But like Gunslinger Auto from 24 best to 100 just did 550. So it's definitely safe to say Jackson Arnold has fallen an extreme amount, 4 to 5 times from probably where it was.
Yeah. And like you're almost at a point where like another alternative strategy play would be like backup quarterbacks in this situation. They've got Deuce Knight, this high 4-star, borderline 5-star guy, and they think the world of him. I think he's like 6'5", 230, huge kid. I think he's a lefty as well. And it's like, all right, like if the groans and the boos get louder and Hugh Freeze has to save his job, does he throw in this Deuce Knight kid?
Time to see what he's made of.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jackson Arnold down. Next one, Garrett Nussmeier losing to Ole Miss. This is a guy I've been saying, hey, quarterback 1. Why, you ask? Because last year in November, he was sputtering at the end of the season, but there was still a conversation of like, if this guy declares, he could still go QB1, and that was before like Ward really took his big jump. Drew Aller had the playoff push.
Yep.
So it was like, I just put that in the memory bank, and then when he stayed, I was like, all right, I think he's gonna have this hype coming back. So he had this hype all season, LSU in the championship conversation. They beat Clemson, which at the time was like, wow, that's a statement win in Death Valley. I think they struggle against a group of 5 team, I forget. Florida, they have 5 turnovers, only produced 7 points on offense. 7 of their 20 points was a pick 6. So a little questionable on offense, and then they go, doesn't look right when he's making his throws versus Ole Miss. There's a lot of questions now in press conferences. He says, I'm not going to comment on my health. And Brian Kelly is like, he's healthy. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but you can see when he's throwing, it's like, this is not looking good. It's almost like Arch week 1.
Yeah, yeah.
Not good. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there, but the offense at LSU might be fraudulent, and they're on watch to continue to go down if they don't figure this out. I'm not particularly high on Ole Miss, to be honest, just from a talent perspective compared to last year's team.
Yep.
But looking at their schedule, they might also run it too. So, Garrett Nussmeier.
All right. Number 3.
Okay. Number 3. Just the stigma and just everything. Drew Aller can't win the big game. James Franklin can't win the big game. He stinks as a quarterback. Like this. Granted, he didn't throw the pick until. Honestly, throwing a pick to end the game is probably the worst way that he could have, just for his reputation.
For sure.
And I feel like the Drew Aller market, you were already either in or out to begin with, and now it's like the Drew Aller, wants to buy his cards is going to be dwindling fast, just because of the Penn State's legacy that is they cannot win a big game right now, and he ends the game with a pick, and that's just who Penn State is.
Yeah, I'm so torn about Drew Aller just because I have so much of him, because I a lot like Klubnik, a lot like, honestly, Nussmeier. I think those guys are going to get a lot of talk when the draft comes around. Aller is just, he's built like an NFL quarterback. Whether he makes good decisions, good reads, and can throw the ball incredibly well is a whole different story. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't think Drew Aller stuff will sell by the national, because by the draft, because I think it's going to. But yeah, that's obviously the highlight for me as a Buckeye fan. I realize we play Penn State in Columbus around Halloween weekend. But what a letdown if you're a Penn State fan. What a letdown. Drew Aller's 0-6 against top 6 teams. The last, 4 or 5, major whiteouts against ranked teams. You don't win any of them. I saw something on Twitter the other day that said, what if Ohio State never lost to Penn State in 2016? What would that do to James Franklin's resume? Again, I look at this guy and I'm like, what has this guy done? What has this guy done for Penn State? What has James Franklin done? He had a good roster in the spring. Congrats. He won 2 playoff games last year. That's probably his greatest accomplishment. He's won in 10 against top 5 or top 10 teams. The record is unbelievably bad. He has not accomplished anything at Penn State. I'm like, what do you look at and be like, this guy's done something? He wins games he's supposed to. We talked about. You and I talked about this before. And you said it, and it's the truest thing ever. Wins games he's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. There is no signature win aside from, I guess the college football playoff, yes. Although people will say, it was SMU. Fair point, right? Like, it wasn't like a true blue blood, and all of that. But I like James Franklin. I feel bad for the guy, but yeah, it is tough to defend all of that. I just say, hey, he's only just never, well, not only, but it's always Michigan, Ohio State. If you look back at all his losses, and bowl game with Ole Miss,
and ranked teams.
Yeah, he just cannot beat Ohio State, Michigan, and now Oregon is in the mix on the annual schedule there. I guess you're looking at double-digit win seasons, and you're not going to win the big game, and that's what it is. That's James Franklin. That's the program. No championships.
4-21 against top 10 teams. 4-21. You just the whiteout. I would love to go. I would tell you it's just by you hear Herb Street talk about it. You hear a lot of big announcers talk about it as the toughest place to play in college football. I wouldn't want to go on the road. I don't like. Shout out to Big Noon Kickoff. It's the only time I'm really going to argue for Big Noon Kickoff because playing a night game in Happy Valley sounds awful, awful. I remember the 2016 block kick, awful. I wouldn't want to go there. So to lose so many of them, I'm like, man. Again, like it's this hard point now because I think the difference between like a Klubnik and an Aller, who I both think are going to be, propped up. I think there'll be some demand for those guys come, the draft. I think Aller is in a better position than a Cade Klubnik. That team is much better. The defense is incredible. Danny Dennis Sutton, that dude's awesome. He's the real deal. Like I watched that game. That dude's an animal. So like I think Penn State's going to be in the mix. I would sit here and tell you they're going to go to the CFP. They could beat Ohio State. I don't think they will. At least if they play tomorrow, I would definitely pick Ohio State. Obviously, I realize I'm biased, but they're going to be in the mix. Aller's going to have a couple big games. So we'll see, but I feel more optimistic that Aller has a better rest of the year than Klubnik. So we'll see how that goes. Nussmeier's in an interesting spot. Again, the SEC's got it like Nussmeier's going to play some more tough games here soon. He's going to have to win some of these to really keep his prices from continuously going down. It's kind of like our conversation around like Lagway and Arch, which we'll get into that in a second. But like if they just keep losing, it's hard to see some optimism and some like uptick in their prices. If it's just like, look at the Florida schedule. If Lagway just keeps losing, where do you look at it and say opportunity to not go down, opportunity to go the other way? So it's just hard to picture, some of these guys having a moment to actually go up without getting one of these signature wins. So we'll see. I'm intrigued. Jackson Arnold does nothing for me. It's kind of like Lagway. It almost seems like you're almost waiting till the offseason to have an opportunity to really move them. I think Texas is going to beat Florida this weekend. I think, there's a good chance Florida moves on from their coach, and it's, the offseason, it's early 2026 before Lagway has much of a market when they're talking about him as, this big physical quarterback that could be QB1 in 2020, the 2027 NFL draft, because I'm not sure there's a lot of opportunity this year. So Jackson Arnold's just a guy I look at as that, like you said, transfer or something else, because I don't see a lot of opportunity for Jackson Arnold to have much uptick here in, the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, and I'm curious to see Texas, Florida this weekend. I think Texas will take it pretty handily. It is in Florida as well, so it's like, man, like this is your spot to really bounce back, Florida and Billy Napier, and do all that. If they do decide to move on again, those voices are getting much louder as well, just like with James Franklin with Billy Napier. So it's like, and then the only thing with Lagway is, if they do go in another direction with the head coach, and does he hit the portal? Like he would be the most desirable quarterback to hit the portal, and I think there's a line out the door to try. I'm trying to. Perhaps I would say. I think typically we haven't like the only time like those highly ranked guys have transferred is like if it's a DJU situation where it's like not really not really up to that level. So it could be where it's like, man, like you're betting on the youth, the tools, and just the upside with Lagway and what he can do, and then you go to a big time program that's going to spend in the portal and see what they can do.
All right, so you mentioned the Texas-Florida game. I think that will be a big game this weekend. What else are we really looking forward to with this weekend slate, kind of keeping an eye on as we, look into next week?
Yep, so going back to Pavia and Ty Simpson, I wanted to put Ty Simpson in my stock up, but
that's your guy. I will say this on every episode we ever record. That is Gabe Cardstack's guy, for sure.
Yeah. He's been my guy from the beginning, and so Vandy beat him last year, and they're trending up 5-0, and that's just you don't know what you're gonna get with. I think this Bama team is different than Week 1, like I mentioned earlier. put them and Florida State on the same field again. I don't think it's the same result. I think they're trending in the right direction. So, you're looking at Bama, bouncing back, and Ty Simpson. They've got a lot of NFL talent. Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, all those guys. They gotta get that run game going. I'm a little worried there. And then just Pavia, like, will this team into another huge win, going 6-0 into the season? He might not be wrong, Ryan. They could be national champs. He could be the best quarterback in college football, man. If they beat Alabama, I might actually buy into that. So that's the other one. And then the last one I would mention, Miami at Florida State. Of course, Florida State losing to Virginia, not ideal. As much as I am not super high on Florida State, I value that loss. I like Virginia. I think in one of the episodes I was like, look out for Virginia. And then, of course, They lost to NC State the following day, which wasn't great. But I like Virginia. They're a scrappy little team. But Miami, the thing with Miami, and I do think they're one of the top teams in the country, I would agree Ohio State's probably the number one. And that's another. Ryan, you might not want me to like Ohio State because you see what happens to Clemson and LSU. So you don't want me to get fully on board here. But for me, I was like, how do they retool this $20 million roster? Anyways, with Miami, it's like Mario Cristobal can lay some stinkies, and it's going to be tough to envision him going perfect throughout the season. I'm just like, you can't trust the guy and just some of these decisions. So. Miami at Florida State. Does Florida State bounce back? Is Miami legit? Are they going to just punish them in a rivalry game? That's another one that I'm curious about.
Yeah, the Pavia Vandy one's interesting because their next four is it's Bama, LSU, Missouri, and Texas. And Texas is on the road. They get Vandy or they get LSU and Missouri at home, but have to go to Bama and have to go to Texas. In the next 4 weeks, so you're going to learn a lot about your boy Pavia in the next month. I think the Texas game is the most intriguing, like I said earlier. Miami, I think the Miami Florida State one will be a little bit more interesting than I would have thought after Florida State lost. But again, rivalry games, I've learned the last couple years, anything can happen in a rivalry game. So you get a Florida State team coming off of a loss with a lot to still play for, and then you get one of the best teams in the country looking to keep their momentum going. Could be, I could see that game really going, anyway. Big on Ruben Bain to start this season. So I look for him to, him to have a moment this weekend against the Seminoles. But I want to point out something, as I know we don't have a ton of time left. We're talking about Stockwatch. We're talking about games to watch. We're talking about a lot of things. I know you said you're not all the way on board yet, but the fact that there's no Buckeyes on some of these stock up lists yet, I'm just getting a little surprised here that one of the most accurate young quarterbacks in the country, accurate and then also young, Julian Sayin. We haven't seen Bo Jackson make this list yet. Arvell Reese doesn't have a ton of cards. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for this episode where we get where my guy Gabe's like, hey, the Buckeyes, they're on our watch list this week, or this game looks exciting. I'm still waiting for my Buckeyes to get some credit.
Yeah, that's fair. And I did want to at least highlight James Pugh, because we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, and I was like, yo, Ryan, what's up with Bo Jackson here? Yep. Because I'm just like, he's leading the team in rushing after 2 weeks. Is he for real? Goes in, looks pretty good. CJ Donaldson, scores twice, and that's cool and all, but this kid looks like he's the truth. As a true freshman, just leading the number one team in the country. So I'm very impressed with Bo Jackson. Julian Sayin, I'm like, fine, he's just there. He's just he's slowly trending up. It's not because all right, think about this. If I may defend myself, we've seen Fernando Mendoza, now Dante Moore go from the top 10-ish to now number one. So those have just been some very drastic spikes. But Julian Sayin, hey, not a lot of people are talking about him. Maybe so.
But I also think it's worth pointing out that he has had some tough games early. I mean, the fact that you beat Texas at home, the preseason number one team, you beat them at home, and then to go on the road to the West Coast to a team that hasn't lost in 4 years at home, and to play like that, again, I obviously watch every snap, and like some of the reads he makes, some of the moves he makes in the pocket, some of the elusiveness. That kid, I'm telling you, he is. I've lived through a full season of Kyle McCord. I've lived through JT Barrett. JT Barrett winning as quarterback in Big Ten history, one of my all time favorite Buckeyes. But like I've lived through some of the like lesser great passing seasons. Obviously, you go from Fields or Haskins, Fields, Stroud. Like you go through some of those years, and you're like, okay, we're making some noise here. And then you go to Kyle McCord, and Will Howard was great, but wasn't always the best passer. This Saiyan kid, man, this kid can pass the ball. Obviously helps when you can, get Jeremiah Smith wide open. But yeah, I really think we're going to get through this season. And obviously Ohio State is the number one team in the country now. But I think you're really going to see some of this stuff from Saiyan. The next big test, they go to Illinois next week. They play Illinois at noon. Obviously that doesn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything 2 weeks ago. We were talking about this. Illinois got smacked, 63 hung up on them by Indiana, and then beats USC. We were talking about Jaden Maavia. Yeah, I think that's how you say his name. We were talking about him last week on Stock Up, and he loses to a team that just got hung 63 on him. Is Indiana the best team in the country here, or is USC a fraud? I'm like, where are we going with this? So we'll learn something. You'll learn something here when we got to go to Champaign in a couple weeks and play Illinois on the road. But then you get into Penn State not long after that. We got to go to Camp Randall. Again, these are games you circle earlier in the year, and you're like, hey, we got to go to Madison. We got to go to Wisconsin. We got to go to Illinois. We got to go to Washington. You're like, okay, maybe one of these. Where's the trap game at? And it's like, I think you'll learn something. Those are not necessarily the easiest places to play. But yeah, Penn State comes to town November 1st, a month from the time this episode will drop, and you'll learn a lot about Julian Saiyan and the Ohio State team when preseason number 2 team in the country comes to town. And when Penn State and Michigan come to Columbus, let me tell you, I've been to every one the last 5 years. It's different. So excited to get another big test here in a couple weeks. Maybe then we'll finally get on Gabe Cardstack's official stock up list.
Yeah, but Ryan, maybe you don't want, because Maeva loses, and
we should start tracking how these guys do after you put them on their list.
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, do not put them on the list.
Yeah, this might be good, because him. Marcel Reed didn't look amazing last week. They still win, but it's like, all right, maybe I'm jinxing it. But Bo Jackson, the goods.
Dog.
So,
all right, who are you keeping an eye out for on this weekend as we wrap it up?
Okay. Well, so this is where I would have gone. Or do they play? Is it this weekend?
Yeah, Minnesota at home, an electric night game. Minnesota. What is it? PJ Fleck coming to bringing the Gophers to town for a night game in the shoe, 7:30.
Yeah. So I want to continue to see this Bo Jackson guy. I'm just so intrigued. I was a huge CJ Donaldson guy. I was never a huge James Peoples guy, and now just Bo Jackson is him. And so I want to watch that. Another one that I want to watch, I guess, on the other side, Justice Haynes. I get it, Michigan guy, but this guy's
really
spreading
good.
it, and he's up there, and not a lot of people are talking about it. I think maybe up in Big Ten country, but
probably pretty fair to say though that Bryce Underwood has probably stolen a lot of that spotlight. What is this quote unquote generational kid gonna do at a prestigious school like that? So I don't think it's unfair to say that Underwood has stolen a lot of that spotlight, and having their head coach suspended, that might take some of it away, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. So I want to see Justice Haynes if he continued to ball out, and then Notre Dame, CJ Carr. They're clicking, Ryan. So Notre Dame might be back, and they're very much in the mix. And it would be interesting, if they're 10-2 versus a 10-2 Penn State. Penn State's non-conference, does that hold them back compared to the Notre Dame? So that's what I'm looking for. I got a couple fun games here that I wrote down that they're just fun. I think people should watch. There's some card implications. So I've got Texas Tech at Houston. Not a ton of cards, but both undefeated. Houston's been outperforming expectations. Texas Tech, we got to watch to see if Baron Morton's healthy. Otherwise, this Will Hammond kid who took over last week versus Utah looks good. I've got Mississippi State, Texas A&M. Mississippi State's a scrappy little team. They took Tennessee to overtime. A&M, I still trust, but Mississippi State, watch out. Iowa State at Cincinnati, I think that's an interesting game.
That's the other Gabe Cardstacks guy.
Yeah, so I'm not super convinced on Iowa State just yet. I know they just blew out Arizona, but I just
Sorsby.
I'm not in love with it. Yeah, but then there's Sorsby at home. They've rattled off 3 in a row. They just beat a pretty decent Kansas team, so I'm looking at that. I've got Virginia, Louisville. Been high on Virginia, Louisville, Miller Moss. Miller Moss, dangerously close, was on the stock down list for me. Like if this would have been
is that the old
last
USC
week,
quarterback?
Yes, and he did not look very good, and that was someone like, hey, I don't think USC was his fault. Maybe it was his fault the way that Louisville looked the first 3 weeks, but they beat Pitt, and I'm interested to see that game. I've also got Michigan at Nebraska, Raiola, Bryce Underwood. That could be a nice little game.
Wait,
Justice
Michigan at
Haynes
Nebraska. That's 2 weeks ago. They already played.
Sorry, Michigan State. Michigan State. Sorry. So
Gotcha.
Michigan State.
Michigan and Nebraska. I was like,
Aiden
Childs.
Childs.
Yeah.
Yep. Aiden Childs at Raiola, and then Washington. All right, so they just lost to Ohio State. Now they got to go all the way across the country and play my boy Malik Washington at Maryland. Do they bounce back? Are they down in the dumps? I don't know. I want to know.
So much to talk about. We could do this forever. Shout out to you for always bringing the great info, for getting me excited for another great weekend of college football. Best sport on earth. Lot to talk to next. Lot to talk about next week, I'm sure. But as always, appreciate all the insight.
Yeah, of course. Always a pleasure.
Shout out to everybody. If you made it this far, drop those comments on the video. Let us know what you want to see from us next week on Stockwatch and going forward. But that's all I got for now, guys. All right. Another fun episode in the books. Shout out to Elizabeth for coming on for a really insightful interview. And shout out to our guy, Gabe Cardstacks, for helping us move the Stockwatch segment forward. Excited to continue to develop that and hopefully turn that into a bigger part of these episodes as the college football season is underway. All right, last but not least, we've got the product launch for this week. Another exciting week. You got flawless basketball last week. You got Ohio State NIL. You got Immaculate Soccer. You got a lot of big products last week. This one's not as insane, but there's definitely still some big stuff coming out. Leaf Vivid Football, Hobby and Jumbo, Prism Black Basketball, 24-25. I think this is going to be a big release. Seems to be loaded with case hits. I saw a Curry and Clay Color Blast. I anticipate that being a big card. I anticipate this being a really, really strong release for Panini. It seems like some of these end of, the basketball release calendar, releases before they give up the licensing. It seems like a lot of these have been pretty loaded. Don't know if that's intentional or not, but I would envision this one being another solid one. So we'll see in another week if that turned out to be true. 3-2 baseball. This is a product that moves pretty well for us. It's an affordable, unlicensed baseball product, but you've got some cool vets in there, some big names, Skeens, Ellie. Those guys have been in there. Griffey have been in past releases. So I would anticipate this being a good release for us. Those unlicensed baseball products, while they don't have the licensing, they are a lot more affordable at times, especially for a brand like a 3-2, that is similar to the 1-on-1, the 3 count, some of those other ones, has normally done pretty well for us. So it has had downtowns before. We've talked about that with our guy Sky B about what the Paul Skeens unlicensed downtown did. Who will we see in the downtown checklist this year? Assuming they're still keeping them, but it's likely Panini's going to continue to make some basketball products with no licensing. So I think they're using these baseball products to determine how they want to build basketball products in the future. So excited for that release. Top Scrum SpongeBob. I mean, what a release! As someone who is super big into the Disney brands. Obviously, I collected a lot of the Disney with my wife and son. We talked about that with Elizabeth earlier. SpongeBob, I think, is one of those ones for, my generation that grew up with SpongeBob, has so much nostalgia built into it. I think this product will actually have a lot of demand. How they grow the SpongeBob, some of these brands, how they grow some of them going forward will be interesting. Like, will we see 5 SpongeBob releases? I don't anticipate that. But I think that's what adds some uniqueness to this product and could make this product in demand. If there's not a SpongeBob release every year, it could create some long-term demand for a product like this. So I'm curious to see how Topps manages a unique one-off brand like SpongeBob. Leaf Metal Halloween, Absolute K-League Soccer, and Panini Turn 4 Racing. So Turn 4 is another Panini spin on the 3 count, the 3 and 2, the 1 and 1. It's that couple cards, high end, in mags. It's a new product for Panini in the NASCAR space. So we run some NASCAR breaks on Whatnot. NASCAR's actually does pretty well for us. Like, we move a good amount of NASCAR. We have some passionate NASCAR collectors. So I would imagine this product will do pretty good. Again, it does well in baseball for us. Wrestling has sold well. Basketball and football are always in demand. So I think that'll be a fun one. Long episode. Sorry to ramble, but hopefully it was another valuable one. If not, let us know how we can improve it. Let us know what else you want to see. 35, 40 episodes in at this point. I have to do the math, but always trying to get better. So shout out to you if you made it this far. But for now, that is all I got. Peace, guys.